welcome to Wild Vittles. So today's episode, we're going to do some barbacoa. And this is out of Hank Shaw's Buck Moose. It's a fantastic book. I'd highly recommend his cookbook. You might say, Chris, how can you use his cookbook and put out on your podcast some of his recipes? All of his recipes are on the internet. Hank is very much an open access kind of guy. And in addition to that, he sells books, cookbooks, and his recipes are so good, even though everything's free on the internet, people like myself still buy his cookbooks. So join me and let's jump in to this barbacoa recipe. All right. So for today's barbacoa recipe, I'm going to be using a whitetail shoulder. And I've got the upper section and the lower section actually. So you got the shoulder blade and then the lower arm. I've separated those two, and as an extra step, and this is not in the recipe itself, I went and put it on the smoker for an hour because it's Christmas Eve, and when I'm recording this, and I'm already doing a Boston butt, or pork shoulder, and some pork ribs, and while I had the fire going, I wanted to go ahead and put this meat on the smoker to add a little bit of flavor to it, and I think it's going to make it give it an extra kick. And the reason I'm actually doing this, this is a barbacoa recipe podcast, but what am I going to do with that meat in the end? You can do tacos, you can do, just have it with mashed potatoes, but I'm going to use it in tamales. Hopefully, that'll be a separate episode. So let's dive into what this is. Oh, I'm going to show some video. Hopefully, it'll be showing right now if you're on the YouTube channel, and you'll see actually it on the smoker, and it gives it kind of a dark red, really wonderful look. So we're in great shape here. Let me kind of jump into this and I'll run through the ingredients just so you know. 2 to 3 pounds of venison from the shoulder or legs. Could be any venison. 2 to 4 canned chipotles in adobo. And I'm gonna use chopped in adobo. 1 red onion. I'm actually using 1 white onion. So flexibility. 5 garlic cloves chopped. I am a little lazy, so I use already pre-chopped minced garlic. 2 bay leaves. A teaspoon of smoked paprika is optional, and anytime it says a teaspoon of something, I think that's a small amount. I generally throw in a little extra. A teaspoon of ground cumin. Teaspoon of ground cloves. A tablespoon of kosher salt. Half a cup of lime juice. I'm not going to have half a cup today. I only got 1 lime. Half a cup of cider vinegar. Quart of beef or venison stock. I'm using actually chicken stock. I'm demonstrating flexibility here. You could put some smoked salt in it, but it's optional. But because I've actually done it in the smoker, not going to need that. So let me run through this real quick. So what I've already done, and I'll do a pan shot of this. I've already chopped up the onion and put it down as a base. Then on top of that, I've put the meat. I've already, tucked in there 2 bay leaves, and I've put on the 5 cloves of garlic. And so let me run through here. Also then, while I was getting ready, in a bowl I've already mixed up a teaspoon of smoked paprika. Actually, I did about 1.5 teaspoons, a teaspoon of ground cumin, and a teaspoon of ground cloves. And the cloves, you'll be like, really? I recommend it. Put the cloves in. It makes the difference in the taste. It's a very unique kind of barbacoa taste. Don't leave it out. I left it out the first time and I regretted it. And a tablespoon of kosher salt. So that's all in my bowl here. And I'm going to shake that over the meat. And I'm in a slow cooker for those that are audio only. So I've got my slow cooker with a liner because I'm trying not to make a mess. I've got the onions on the bottom. I've got the meat, the blade roast and the arm roast from a whitetail buck that I took last fall. Already smoked for an hour, 2 bay leaves, and then I had all of the spices mixed in a bowl, and I've kind of shook a coating of that over the meat. So let me look here, and if you can see my cookbook here, it's got splotches. If you could see it, I've got splotches all over the pages because I cook with these open in real time. This isn't just for a podcast. I use these things every day. Let's see, I've got all of the spices in. I'm going to put some lime juice in, so I'm taking a lime squeezer and I'm going to juice this over the top so I don't get any lime seeds into my mix here. You know, I read and I see on the internet that lime juice is actually kind of a tenderizer. And so I'm spreading this all over the meat as I squeeze this lime juice, or you could do it by hand, but when I do that, I end up with pieces of lime and lemon type seeds into my mixture. Then I got to fish those out, and nobody's happy with that. I'm gonna do half a cup of cider vinegar. And when they say cider vinegar, I assume that they mean apple cider vinegar. I don't actually know that, but I know that it won't hurt it. So I'm gonna put a half a cup. I'm measuring that out right now. And about to pour that over. So a little bit of acid into the mix. Always helpful. And then a quart of venison stock. Oh, before I do that, I had put everything kind of pre-mixed. The only thing I didn't do yet was the 2 to 4 canned chipotles and adobo. I have here, I had to order this off of Amazon actually, so it's La Costin chipotles. There's diced chipotle peppers in adobo, and it's a nice way, because otherwise you just buy them cans. The vinegar makes me cough. Still making me cough. And you have to cut them up every time, and I felt like it's kind of wasteful. This way I can kind of fish them out of a jar and put it in the refrigerator, and it keeps quite a while. So I've done 2 big spoonfuls so far. I'm gonna go with probably 3 big spoonfuls. Spread that out. And that looks delish. Put that on the meat, kind of dolloping it around. And so now I'm to the part where I'm going to put the quart of, they say venison stock or beef stock, and I've actually got chicken broth. You make do with what you got. So we're going to pour this in. And I'm kind of pouring it over the meat to mix up, you know, some of the ingredients I've got over this. And then I'm going to take this crock pot and I'm going to go plug it in to high in the wall here, and it is going to cook all day long. I am a little bit worried because I've got these 2 hunks of meat in here, whether or not it's going to, all the meat's going to be submerged sufficiently. So I may, midway through, need to rearrange the meat as it shrinks. Because if you didn't know, mussels contract as they cook. Okay, I think that is good. We've now put all the ingredients. I've talked you through each of that. I am going to fade to black, and when we come back, this is going to be finished. We'll shred it, and this will be your barbacoa recipe. And welcome back. Well, it's been a long wait, about 6 hours, and as I pull the lid off this slow cooker, what was revealed inside is a beautiful shoulder roast and blade roast from this whitetail. I'm reaching down in with my tongs and grabbing out the meat and putting that into kind of a bowl, almost like a salad bowl, or this case what I'm using is I'm actually a pasta bowl, a serving bowl. And I'm shredding that meat already with the tongs, and it's that tender. Because of the 6 hours, it's broken down all of the collagen and connective tissue that sits in both that arm roast and that blade roast. The bones completely just fall away from the meat. They look like museum quality bones, like you've had them actually cleaned. And that's one of the beauties of this recipe, is the full utilization of that shoulder. You'll also notice in the color, if you do the smoking, that you're going to see kind of a smoke ring in that meat. As you shred it, it distributes that flavor throughout the meat and whatever use you may have. It's extremely hot meat, so as you shred it, let it cool before you move on to your next step. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, what is barbacoa really good for? I love it for its versatility. First of all, it's an extremely easy recipe, as I think I said in the beginning. I mean, you really just, take a cut that is, an entire muscle group, and put that into a slow cooker. You don't have to do the smoking. It's not necessary. You throw these ingredients in, which are pretty straightforward, and you just let heat and time take its course. And if you're going to do it on a smoker, it takes a little bit of prep and a little bit more skill, but you can put it directly into a slow cooker, turn it on high. I generally turn it on high for the 6 hours. You can do low and do all day, and it will have great results as well. At the end of that, you have, I think, a base for many different kinds of things. I like to use it in tamales. I generally do tamales over the holidays. It makes great tacos, either breakfast tacos, you want to mix it with eggs, or it can be with, dinner or lunch, supper or lunch type tacos, enchiladas, empanadas, quesadillas. You can tell I like Mexican food. There are a lot of things that this can be a base for. So extremely versatile. There's a couple other reasons. You heard me mention that's a good way to fully utilize the shoulder. In I guess my early days of processing my own animals, I used to take the shanks and the shoulders and painstakingly, and I mean painstakingly, break that down, get as much sinew as I could out of it so that I could go into the grind pile. And while I will tell you, I am a big fan of grinding up deer because I use the burger for so many different things. I'm also become a fan of using whole muscle groups for things that they are almost intended for. And what do I mean by that? They turn out beautifully and they don't need any extra work. So when I'm cleaning a deer or when I'm processing a deer, any of you that have done it know that removing a shoulder is extremely easy. There's no socket that attaches. It's really just attached by ligaments and muscle. And so when you separate a shoulder from a deer carcass, it's extremely simple to do. And when you learn how to then break that shoulder down and separate the blade roast, so kind of where the joint is between the arm roast and the blade roast, once you find that joint, it's extremely easy to cut. And the same can be said for between the shank and the arm roast. And when you break that all out, you're left with 3 beautiful pieces of meat that can each be used for their own purpose. And so I no longer grind shanks. I no longer grind shoulders, either the blade roast or the arm roast. I do sometimes on larger deer or elk, I will pull out a flat iron steak out of a blade roast, or if I get if I'm gun hunting and I hit a shoulder and there's a lot of what's the term for it? A lot of hemorrhaging around that area, and you get a lot of blood in the muscle, and I have to trim that. I might do something different and trim around and grind if it kind of messed up the shoulder for roast, if you will, for lack of better terms. Those are kind of the only reasons, but just think about how much time you put into processing an animal, and if you have to painstakingly go through not 1 but 2 shoulders and front arms, it saves you a ton of time. So it's more efficient. It's extremely effective in utilizing the meat from those bones because you won't lose any from the trim. I don't care how good a butcher you are, at least good a home butcher you are, you won't be able to get all the meat off those bones. Not like you will if you're doing it in a manner such as you're roasting it. So for those reasons, I love to do these whole muscle groups in the front shoulder, and I love to do barbacoa because it's an extremely effective way to transform that meat into a base that I then put into many other dishes. I think that pretty much concludes what we want to talk about today on barbacoa. Highly recommend it. Go out and you can go to honestfoods.net or Hank Shaw and put in barbacoa, and his recipe will pop up because everything Hank Shaw has is on the internet. Now, if you're like me, I still like a physical book, and I went and bought his recipe book, Buck Moose. I'd highly recommend it. It's at the top of my list. It's one of the first things I look at, but it's not all inclusive. There's a lot more out there in the universe. So, and it's not all of his recipes either, because to most of my knowledge, he continues to add to that library. And his book, is a point in time, and I think he modifies these things as well. So, a good place to start. as he says in his cookbook, one of the, I think, top 3 easiest recipes that he puts out there. I think I mentioned as well earlier in the podcast that Jesse Griffith has a very similar recipe in his book, Afield. Also highly recommend Afield. Go out and look for that. It is a beautifully written, beautifully photographed book that's more than just a recipe book. It really tells a story, and there's recipes for going to the surf. There's recipes for going pig hunting. There's recipes for going deer and turkey hunting. It shows butchering techniques. It's a fantastic and wonderful book. It's a great coffee table book. It's a great read. So thoroughly enjoy both these authors. I'd like to have them on sometime to actually ask them questions. I don't know if either of those gentlemen would give me the time of day, but hopefully someday. So I'm going to wrap this up as one of the short sections. I do have a kind of a bonus episode that I'm not sure if I'm going to drop it next week or midweek, where I actually took some of the barbacoa and made it into a breakfast quesadilla just to enjoy it during the Christmas holidays. I wanted to also do a tamale episode, but that is a quite involved process, and I got kind of in a time pinch over the holidays and needed to focus on the making of the tamales and not documenting it. So another time we'll do that in a more in-depth. But the good thing to know is every year I'm experimenting. This year I think I have perfected my masa technique. I need to channel my inner abuela, and I think that through the research that I've done of the videos, I think I've tackled now making that masa, and the key was using a stand mixer to whip up the fat. I think, the lard that you put in that masa to make it just perfect. So that's in things to come. So final few words, if you would, I really, really appreciate it if you could give me a 5-star rating. If you don't think I deserve it, please comment as to what you think that I might deserve. I do benefit from that, as it'll make my podcast a little bit easier to find. Please do tell friends and reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at Wild Vittles Podcast on Instagram, and on YouTube, it's the Wild Vittles Podcast as well. Thank you, and I hope that you'll try barbacoa. I hope you have a deer shoulder or a deer roast sitting in your freezer, and that this would inspire you to go grab that dude, put it in the refrigerator so it can thaw, and then over a weekend make some barbacoa. And it's just the beginning of your journey. So thank you, and let's do it for the love of the game. Good time.